purpose, really, of this service? Okay, it's a good question to ask us. This particular service, the closure of a church. How do you handle that? I can honestly say that the last thing that any pastor wants to do is close the church. No pastor looks forward to that. You want to see the church grow. You want to see the church maybe start other churches, but not close the church. That's the last thing that you want to do. And yet that's what we're doing. And so it's good for us to think about, how do we handle this? How are we to look at it? How are we to assess it? So I want to just say a few things just to get this into right perspective. Firstly, this will be news for some of you, maybe some of you folks from Storrington, but not for those of you who are part of New Life Church. Okay, now here's what we're doing. You know this already. Okay, we're going to be closing New Life Church. That's our last Sunday as a church today. At some point, we're going to close the charity and start a new charity. We're relocating down the Lewis Road, right? Now, if you remember, maybe cast your minds back 3 years before we met David Scull or anyone like that. That's what we was talking about doing, remember? And we started on the road to doing all those things. Relocating for strategic reasons and because there's no space. Relocating for those reasons. Closing the old charity, starting a new one. So we was already doing all those things. And one of the reasons why was strategy. We'd been given some money, very generously, £300,000, in order to get a property so we can house workers, because it's so expensive living in Brighton. And for that we needed a new charity. But we also recognised that strategically we needed to move down the Lewis Road somewhere to have a chance of growing. Okay? And so, in many ways, what's happened is we're doing all the same things. We're going to be closing the church, starting the charity, starting a new charity. We're going to be in a stronger position because we'll have something we've also been praying for every week, more leadership. It's an answer to prayer, isn't it? So in many ways, we're doing what we was doing, but we're going to be stronger. But there's also something else, and that is this, that you could think, in what way is the church closing? Because the church is the people, right? We know that. And pretty much all the people stay the same. And the vision stays pretty much the same. The aim. So in what way are we closing? Well, I think at a very practical level, we're closing for this reason. Or this is a perspective at least. The Grace Baptist Union, who are funding the new church plant for David, or funding his salary, or a large part of it, and the force behind that, who initiated him in the plant, they're not going to fund him to come and join our church, are they? So for that reason, we have to start a new church. But here's the good thing, okay? And the important thing, we're not just pretending to start a new church. This is going to be a new church. And it's going to be a new church in what way? Well, it's not a change of people. It's not like this church has died and we've all dissipated and there's someone starting with a new team and everything else. It's not that, is it? But it is a psychological change. It feels like, I hope it feels like for us, we are starting a brand new church. And that is really important, I'll tell you why. Because it gives us a new lease of life and energy. And gives us a great opportunity to start afresh, to let go of baggage and to adopt new traditions that will serve us well. So it's a psychological thing. But what's important about this service then is that we have proper closure. That there is a sense in which New Life Church has closed. We don't want to have it in our minds that, oh no, we're just carrying on under a different name or whatever. No, this service is all about the end of something. It's about closure. So how do we do that? Well, in terms of an assessment of the past, as we come to close, it's important to acknowledge things. Okay, so I'm going to give you some things that are good for us to think about. Actually, let me begin by reminding us and perhaps giving some of us the news about how the church started. The church started in 1995 with Eric Palmer. How many people know Eric Palmer? Quite a few of you, but not everyone. when Eric Harmer moved over. Okay? Now what we see in this passage here, in 1 Corinthians, is the church dividing over leaders. Okay? Paul says, I could not address you as people who live by the Spirit, but as people who are still worldly, mere infants. I gave you milk, not solid food, for you were not ready for it. Indeed, you are still not ready. You are still worldly, for there is jealousy and quarrelling among you. Are you not of the world? Are you not acting like mere humans? One says, I follow Paul, and another, I follow Apollos. In verse 5, look at what he says. What is Apollos and what is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe. And just a little bit lower in the passage, he talks about another leader who's worked with them, Cephas. Do you know who Cephas was? Yeah? The Apostle Peter. So at the church at Corinth, which is a messy church by the way, a really messy church, they had the Apostle Paul, Apollos. We don't know a great deal about Apollos, but he was a great speaker. We know that much, okay? And he was up there with the apostles. So they've had Paul, Apollos, and Peter. Great leaders. But they weaponised those leaders and divided against one another over them. But here's the point, okay? In Ephesians chapter 4, the Bible tells us this, that God gave to the church apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors and teachers to build up the church for works of service until we reach maturity. Okay? And that means that leaders given to the church are really a sign of God's blessing. And Eric Harmer was the first of great blessings. Think about this. If Eric Harmer didn't answer the call to come here 26 years ago in November, where would you be sitting right now? Where would you be sitting? None of you would be sitting in here. And when you think about all that's been achieved over the years, none of it would have been achieved. Let me just tell you what we've done over the years, okay? We have married, not that many couples actually, 11. 11 people have been married. We've conducted 23 funerals since we've been here. Quite a large number of those people came to faith through the ministry of this church before going to be with the Lord. Isn't that amazing? We've dedicated 21 babies, and we've got 3, I think, that haven't yet been dedicated, I think. I may have my maths wrong there, but anyway. But 23. We've baptised 44 new believers over the years. 44. That's good. We've got one waiting to be baptised, poor Chloe, but COVID got in the way. And now, when you think about that, and as I said, imagine Eric never came. Think of all the messy churches and the way that we've blessed lots of people in the community over the years. None of that would have happened. Moulsecoomb would certainly have been a poorer place were it not for that decision that Eric made. And Eric was really, in many ways, a great leader. Flawed, like we all are. You know, I'm flawed and Eric was flawed. But he was a great leader for us. God bless us. But he wasn't the only leader we had, was he? There was Giles. What a great man Giles was, right? What a blessing he and his wife to the church. God blessed us with them. There's our dear Grenville. Again, I mean, we have been given real quality people by the Lord. We should be so appreciative. As we look back, this is what God has done for us and through us. And Michael, I mean, what a godly example to us all. A wonderful man. He and his wife were. And there's others, Marcus, many people blessed by him. Some of you probably won't remember Jody Barnard. He was with us for a little while, a long time ago. We've been blessed with real quality leaders. And so as we look back, that suggests to us, when we look at baptisms and everything else, that God has blessed us. But we might look at it differently. Okay, we can look at it like that and think, well, you know, it's been a success, but we're closing it. It's kind of like, but we weren't good enough, you know. We didn't quite make it. And we can pat ourselves on the back for all the reasons I just gave, those baptisms and everything else, or, and been given great leaders, or we can sort of mourn the fact that we never quite reach maturity. If you think of maturity, a baby is completely dependent on others. We've never quite come to a point where we're not dependent on others. We haven't reached maturity as a church in many ways, or in some ways. At least financially, in other ways too. And so we can think, you know, like my old school reports, could have done better. Definitely, that was my school reports. And we can beat ourselves up for that. Worse, we can beat one another up. They didn't work hard enough. If only we'd have done this more. If only, we can kind of have a sense of resentment that we didn't do more when we could have. Well, how do we assess ourselves in the past? Well, here's one thing to say. We are being given another great leader in David. It's been a great blessing for me getting to know this man. He's not here, so I'm not saying it to big him up. I don't know if you'll ever listen to this. But if you do listen, Dave, you've got to send me the cheque for this, okay? As we agreed. But he really is, he's a real quality person, and I'm not just saying that. You know, he's someone that's obviously, he was raised by generations of believers before him, I think, godly parents, grown up in the faith, grown up in a strong church tradition, a good church tradition, being well taught, went to probably the best Bible college in the country, Oak Hill, and has sat under great ministry himself. He's a quality man that God has given to us. And that means that whatever we make in the past, God hasn't finished with us yet, is he? He hasn't finished. There's more to be done, more to come. And so we can thank God for that. But there's no point in either beating ourselves up about the past or puffing ourselves up. Okay? We don't want to do any of those things. Think about the leaders. What does Paul say? What after all is Apollos and what is Paul? Okay? Did Paul and Apollos beat themselves up or puff themselves up? No. He says only servants through whom you came to believe. Not only does he say that, but he says, verse 7, so neither the one who plants, that's himself, Paul, nor the one who waters is anything. And think about that. It had the Apostle Paul, Apollos, Cephas, and those great leaders. What does Paul say? We're not anything. We're not anything. They had a very sobering view of themselves. He says we're not anything. Why? Now that's not a false humility, right? Why does he say that? Well, what does he tell us? One planted, another watered. Okay? What does he mean by that? Okay, well think about it. What does it mean that to plant something is to sow a seed, right? You plant the seed and you hope it's going to grow. And what does it mean to water it? That's like to add the nourishment, isn't it? That's what you do. I've got a pear tree in my garden, planted it, and I water it, okay? And Paul is like the one that planted. He's the great evangelist, scattering seeds, seeing people come to faith. Apollos was a great waterer of the seed, gave the nourishment to build for it to grow, right? But here's the thing. If someone plants a seed and another one waters it, what do they then do? They're like waiting, right? It's like, come on. They're absolutely powerless to do the thing that really matters, right? They can't make anything grow. Nothing. It's like, come on. You know, it'll do what it does in its own time. The magical bit, the miracle bit, the actual growing of believers, the birth and the growth of believers, only God can do that. You know, one can plant, another can water, but only God can do the miracle. And that's why Paul says, look, what are we? We didn't do the magic. We didn't do the miracle. That's God. And anyone else could have planted seeds. Anyone can water. only God can make it grow. Now the other analogy that Paul uses is that of building. Verse 10, by the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder. Okay? We've got a couple of guys in construction here. In fact, more than a couple, I think. And you don't need to be in construction to know that if you're going to build a house or a temple or anything else, you need good foundations, right? And Paul has laid, as a master builder, the best foundation for the church, Christ. And then he tells us that the rest of us do the building. For no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. In verse 10, if anyone builds on this foundation, using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hail, straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. If a person, it will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. If what has been built survives, the person will receive a reward. If it is burned up, the builder will itself suffer loss, but yet will be saved, even though only as one escaping through the flames. So he uses this building analogy, right? And he talks about how we build on the foundation of Christ. And now, as we look back and assess our work over the years, we've got the baptisms, etc. That's great. People come to faith. But that is God's work, right? The question for us is, how did we build? And here's the thing. What does Paul say? He says this. God will bring that to light, right? There's a judgment coming. We all have to give an account for all of the work we've done over the years. And it's to God. It's not to one another and not to ourselves. It's to God. And so I think that means this. When we look back to assess, weigh up, it's good to learn lessons. Let's leave God to be the judge of the work that we've done. That's his business. He'll test the quality. Here's another thing. In terms of, we didn't see a church come to maturity as we would like to have. And the story's not over yet, we know that. But in 25 years, it's a long time. But here's the thing, right? What does he say here about the quality of the building? He says, verse 14, if what has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. You know, that's talking about the judgment. When God finally assesses everyone's work, then we will receive a reward. And that means this. Whether a church, a big one or a small one, is raised up as a result of our labour, that's God's business. It's God's business. Why do we work hard and invest ourselves? Why? Not to get this church. We want to see churches come up everywhere. But we do it for the reward. Our reward isn't the size of the church. Our reward isn't the multiplicity of ministries. Our work will be rewarded by the Lord himself. There's something more to get from this building analogy. Again, you can ask Dan or Paul or anyone else that's worked in building sites. They know this better than me. But when a building is constructed, you don't get a builder going there, and he doesn't go there digging all the foundations, putting in all the concrete or whatever, and then building the walls, and then doing all the electric. He doesn't do all of it, does he? Different people come in, right? And do different parts of it. They're given a blueprint, a design, and they've all got, different people have got their bit to do, right? But what happens is, you sort of look back, there's this plan for this building. Everyone has got work to do, right? And the job's not finished until the building is complete, right? That's how it works. And that means as we look forward and as we begin this new venture, we're looking to build this new church, right? Now, just a proviso, just in case anyone's getting a bit hot under the collar, Jesus said, I will build my church. And as we were talking about just now, God is the one that makes it grow, but that does nothing to negate the fact that we have a part in this building work. That's exactly what Paul is saying here, right? And so the question is, so as we come to this new building, how will we build? How will you build? You've got work to do. When it comes to building a house, the only way it gets done is by doing the work. Let me tell you about the work. Okay? A couple of you at least could say, what do you know about construction? Dan and Paul in my line of sight there. Yeah, look at my shed. It's a bit rickety. but when it comes to construction, right, generally it means getting up early, generally speaking. And it's hard work. Do you know what else? Building, it actually costs a lot of money. It costs money to get a house built, right? It costs money, it costs time, a lot of time, and it costs a lot of energy. So when people build houses and things like that, the analogy that Paul is using, they give a lot of their time and a lot of their energy into making that happen. And usually, if it's their building, a lot of their money. Okay, that's what happens. And so, here's something to reflect on. How do you build? I'm not asking how have you been building, and I hope you've built so as to get reward. But as we look to the future, how will you build? So what does it mean to build with gold and silver and costly stones? What does that mean? We can the story of the three little pigs. Kind of this reminds me of that a bit. There's the little piggies that built with the sticks and the hay, and their work was revealed with fire, wasn't it? Well, a strong blast of wolves' breath blowing all down. But there's the other little piggy that built with bricks. Did a good job. What does it mean to build with costly stones and gold and silver? Because isn't that how you want to build? And isn't that how I want to build? Well, it's very simple, really, folks. It means this. It means that our building costs us. That's what it means. We invest a lot. That's what it means. It means we sacrifice things. Because, if I want to build a house, that means I can't have the money that would go on other things. I can't do that. And the time that would go on other things, can't do that because I'm not going to have this house, right? So we make sacrifices. We sacrifice precious things, costly things. Let me just give you an example, right? Suppose, for example, you have 3 holidays a year. You might say, a week, 2 weeks abroad in the summer, 2 weeks abroad in the winter, and 2 weeks abroad in the spring or whatever. Okay, because you've got loads of money and these lovely holidays abroad. Like, you might say, well, I really like those holidays, but I'm going to sacrifice one of those holidays, and the money that I'd have put into that holiday, I'm going to put into the church. And the time that I'd have put into that holiday, I'm going to put into the church. That would be quite a radical thing to do, wouldn't it? It's what the Americans do every time they come over here, isn't it? You might say, oh yeah, it's a bit of a busman's holiday, love it really. Well, they could be going to the Bahamas and put their feet up on the beach somewhere, didn't they? They'd have to come here and paint flipping St George's Hall. It's not exactly a great holiday, is it? Knocking on people's doors in your home, trying to share the gospel and getting the door closed in your face. Not a great holiday. That's what they do. But you see, what they're doing is it's costing them. It's costing. And starting a church is costly. There is no other way of building a building without cost. Apart from wood, hay and straw. What does that mean? That's cheap church. Cheap. Easy. It's like, rather than giving the best of your time, you give the worst of your time. Rather than giving the best of your offerings, you give whatever you happen to have left at the end of the week or whatever. Yeah? It's the cheap version. That's what it is, isn't it? Wood, hay and straw. Stuff that doesn't really matter to you that much. churches are built on costly things. No cheap way, no easy way of doing it. Time, energy, and money. That's the three things. As we embark on this next adventure, those of you going who be in other churches, those of you in Storage as you continue, wood, hay and straw, or is it going to cost you? Are you going to pay the price? To close with, by the way, the little ones have been absolutely astounding. I want to say thank you guys, you've been really good. As we close, as we look back, we kind of said, yeah, there's great things that we can applaud ourselves for. There's things we can, moan about and be resentful if we wanted to be like that. But it's better to just let God do the judging, isn't it? He knows, and He will reward us. Right. And as we look forward, wanting to build, encouraging us to build, make the costly sacrifices to build with gold, silver, and costly stones. But here's a question, and this is where we're going to finish. If it's true what I was saying earlier, what Paul says, one plants, another waters, but God makes it grow. If we transfer that principle to the analogy of building, it's like I can give all of my energy and my most costly offering and all my time, and we can all do that. We may lay down our lives, right, for this new church, and there's no guarantee that there will be, that anything much will come out of it. And so if it's true, what Paul says about water and planting, if it's God that makes it grow, God doesn't even need us. The Bible tells us that if we don't speak about God, the stones will cry out. He doesn't actually need us. So, if that's the case, then why bother with gold, silver, and costly stones? Why not just the wood, hay, and straw? Because God can make it happen anyway, and it's not down to us anyway. Well, that's true, and we should be grateful for that because it means it doesn't rest on our shoulders. We don't carry the weight of the church on our shoulders. We just give ourselves serve for it. But why bother? Well, we do it for the reward. In 1 Corinthians chapter 4, the next chapter, Paul says this: I care very little if I am judged by you or any human court. Indeed, I do not even judge myself. This is why I'm saying we leave judgment to God. My conscience is clear, but that does not make me innocent. It is the Lord who judges me. Therefore, judge nothing before the appointed time. Wait until the Lord comes. He will bring to light what is hidden and will expose the motives of the heart. At that time, each will receive their praise from God. Why build with gold and silver and costly stones? Why? Because we want to receive that praise from God. The praise from God, what is that? It's this. Welcome, good and faithful servant. Now that might not sound like a big deal to you, but think about what that means. Every trial that we endure for the sake of the kingdom, we get welcomed into an eternal reward. That means that it's all an investment. It's not wasted. And it's the best investment that any of us can possibly make. Nothing on this planet lasts for long. George said we're going to talk about the shed that I'm building, and it's up, and still got a bit of work to do on it. But 15 years' time, 20 years' time, 30 years' time, it probably won't be there. It's true, isn't it? And you look around Brighton, I've been here 25 years, there are buildings that were here that aren't here anymore. Nothing lasts. There was Brian with the car earlier. The car's just about possibly dead, isn't it? It's just on its way. if we didn't get to the scrapyard tomorrow, it'll get there sometime in the not too distant future. It's on its way there. The only thing worth investing in is what Jesus died for. The building up of the church. If you invest in anything else, ultimately you can't take it with you. It's a waste. It's futile. Invest